Afternoon, everyone. It's a great pleasure to speak at this conference, and I wish to thank the organizers for the invitation, opportunity to speak to you on important issues. But I know that the topic is investment opportunities, but I think it's not appropriate for the IMF to suggest any investment opportunities to anyone. So I prefer to disappoint you now rather than disappointing you later, suggesting an investment opportunity that is not appropriate. So what I thought I could do is to focus a little bit more on the earlier session topic of the economic outlook, both globally and in Europe, and then to look at the implications of this global outlook for pension systems, especially public pension systems, and the need for reform in a number of these pension systems, but also options for private pension plans. I think there is an important link between these two topics, because unless we complete this cyclical recovery and we limit the damage that the crisis is making on potential growth, it will be very difficult for public finances to be restored, and then very, very difficult to honor the promises that we have to provide a decent standard of living for our citizens when they retire. The unprecedented policy interventions with monetary and fiscal instruments, and also financial sector support that we have seen in the last 3 years have prevented a meltdown in the financial system, supported household income, and softened the impact of the crisis. And I think no doubt we avoided the worst, and the global recovery is underway. But it's not the kind of recovery that we can be satisfied with. The headline figures for GDP growth look quite decent. In fact, our forecast is that global activity will expand 4.5% this year, and a little less next year, but above 4%. But it's a very uneven, unfragile recovery. It's uneven because there is a sharp divergence in the economic performance across countries, as it has been said here in the morning. Emerging markets and developing economies growing quite robustly. But the advanced economies having a very sluggish recovery with unemployment still very high. And I think Europe provides a good example of this unevenness in the recovery. The emerging economies in Europe are expected to grow twice as fast as the advanced economies here. I think the slow growth in trading partners is slowing growth in the advanced economies. And the recovery is also fragile, and that means that weak growth combined with the very limited policy room that we have now, both in the fiscal and in the monetary front, means that any shock could trigger a reversal of this recovery. And there are quite important risks in the horizon. There is renewed turbulence in sovereign debt markets, funding difficulties in banks, and problems in real estate markets. And a number of European countries are already facing this adverse feedback loop between financial turmoil and the real economy. And given the tightly integrated financial system in Europe, it's possible that spillovers go across countries. So what needs to happen to shift this recovery from a fragile and uneven one to strong and balanced growth that was pledged by the G20 a year ago in Pittsburgh? I think that would require two fundamental and difficult economic rebalancing acts. First is an internal rebalancing in the advanced economies, when private demand collapsed in these economies, fiscal stimulus helped to alleviate the fall in output. But now fiscal stimulus has to give way to fiscal consolidation. And this means that we need to move to private demand to sustain growth. The second shift is an external rebalancing, which needs to take place between the key deficit and surplus economies in the world. The United States, for instance, needs to shift growth towards external demand. And some key emerging surplus economies need to shift growth to domestic demand. Even here in the euro area, there is an internal rebalancing challenge. Many southern European economies have developed quite sizable and persistent current account deficits, while some other core European economies are running substantial surpluses. But of course, the fact that you are all in a currency union makes this rebalance more difficult. There are, I think, four set of policies that could buttress this recovery. First, wherever private demand is still weak, central banks need to maintain supportive monetary conditions. But of course, we have to be realistic about how much can be delivered when policy rates are already low, and we know that there are limits to the effectiveness of quantitative easing. The second important issue to address is to continue with the financial sector repair and reform. I think if there are banks that are persistently on using ECB facilities or on government support, they need to restructure. And I think also more transparency of exposures and more effective use of stress tests would help to restore confidence and would help to ease lending conditions, especially for small and medium enterprises, which are so important for job creation. Third, the governments need to address the issue of fiscal consolidation. If it hasn't yet started, it has to start next year. But to limit the impact, the negative impact of fiscal consolidation in the economy, it's important that this adjustment is embedded in a medium-term plan, which is focused on entitlement reforms, and that tries to protect spending in infrastructure and in education and these other types of investment that are so important to boost growth in the long term. And to be credible, this adjustment has to be based on fiscal rules, on independent fiscal agencies, this type of institution framework that gives confidence that the adjustment is going to be carried for a longer time. And the fourth thing, as I said before, is this shift in external rebalancing between surplus and deficit economies. The task on the fiscal front is quite challenging. Our estimates is that Europe would need an adjustment of 6.2 percentage points of GDP on a PPP-weighted basis average if it wants, for instance, to return to an illustrative target of 60% of GDP for debt by the year 2030. I know that many European countries have already committed to undertake substantial adjustment. This is half of what is necessary. But this adjustment that I'm mentioning does not take into account the increase in age-related spending arising from demographic pressures. And in the advanced economies, if you look, for instance, just for healthcare spending, it's estimated that there will be an increase in 3.5 percentage points of GDP by year 2030.